we're seeing who the best fighter in the world is, and we're getting people to watch so that the fans can appreciate something that I find to be the most loved thing in my life, next to my wife, you know? So, I don't know. I think it's a shame when that shit happens, especially when it's like an ego thing. But also at the same time, I don't really think that that's too much of what Jon Jones is doing. I'm more speaking in terms of what I kind of see in other people. I think,
why is that fight not happening? Well, it could be for two reasons. It's either that Jon Jones is using a strategy to have more money. You could say it, Jizz. Go for it. Come on, say what you want to say. But I think that's why he's doing it. You know, if he's doing it just to hold the title, to serve the wave, this is...
Joe Rogan lit the fuse the moment he said it out loud. Jon Jones is allegedly asking for $110 million to fight Tom Aspinall, OT, in Las Vegas. Not at Madison Square Garden, but at the White House at AT First. It sounded like pure clickbait. Then the shock wore off and the debate began that is this the boldest negotiation in UFC history, or just another headline in a career built on chaos? The MMA world instantly split. Some hailed it as strategic genius from a generational talent. Others called it a blatant stall tactic, disguised as spectacle. Rogan clarified that it wasn't a confirmed demand, but what he's hearing behind the scenes crucial detail that keeps it in the realm of rumor, while still blowing up every combat sports feed in the world.
Jon Jones finally wants to fight Tom Aspinall, but this time at the White House. I told you guys that Jon Jones was playing chess, not checkers, this entire time. Someone just tweeted this at Jon Jones saying, "Ducking Tom Aspinall, ? Best decision you ever made, ? Jon responded, "Choosing when to attack and where you want the battlefield to be is not ducking, my friend." I tried telling every single one of you that Jon Jones was never ducking Tom Aspinall. It's very clear here that Jon Jones is playing chess.
Star Aspinall would have been if we just would have got that fight over with right away. Think of the star Ngannou still would have been for this company if you just would have had that fight and moved it on. And then you have an epic rivalry between those two, Aspinall and Ngannou. Like the years and years of amazing heavyweight fights could have been happening if Jon Jones just wasn't a petulant child, and if the UFC wasn't just the, "Oh no, it's fine, he's just finding himself," like just so annoying.
Reports suggest a massive UFC 250th anniversary card in 2026 is quietly being assembled, and whispers say the White House has been floated as a legitimate venue. For Jon Jones, it's the perfect pitch. A historic stage, a mythic purse, and total control of the narrative before a single punch is thrown. For Tom Aspinall, the answer is simply yes to any location if it means the undisputed king finally steps into the cage. The backdrop makes the twist even sharper. In June 2025, Jones stepped away, drifting for months around a unification fight that never materialized. Aspinall stayed active, kept building momentum, while fans waited for a date that never came. Then came the swerve. Jones re-entered the USADA testing pool. Hints of a return in cryptic interviews. No opponent named. No timeline confirmed. But one headline loud enough to erase the retirement, least for a day. The belt may have moved on, but the gravitational pull of the old champion never faded. That's how a rumor gets loud enough to sound like a plan. Reactions were instant. Daniel Cormier called it emotional whiplash, adding, "The public keeps getting strung along while the division stalls." Frustrated analysts echoed the sentiment tired of cryptic posts, disappearing promises, and negotiations that feel like performance art. But Jones' loyalists pushed back. They pointed to a career of walking through fire, not around it. For them, this is an avoidance tease architecture. Pick the place, pick the stakes, then show up under the lights and win. It's either veteran savvy or high-level manipulation, depending on your view. Either way, T keeps the story loud. And through it all, Aspinall hasn't flinched. No outrage, no theatrics.
But what did you make of it when you heard Jon calling out Alex of all people?
I think he does
do this because Alex Perez now he's like big star in the UFC. Everybody loves him, so he know what he's doing. But I believe he should to fight against Aspinall. But I think he a little bit afraid of him, because Aspinall is someone who can really stop him and beat him.
Yeah,
That's what he believe. But that's what I think that he believes if he can.
I was absolutely confident that Jones versus Aspinall was done and we were going to do it. And here we are today, so you never know. I don't get into it until it actually happens.
Is there a fight that you, almost made that didn't happen?
Aspinall Jones. The fight was done. Everybody had agreed to it. Everybody agreed to the whatever, and then Jones came back and said, "I'm going to retire."
Jon Jones fan is anybody, and I've always defended he's not afraid of Tom. He's willing to fight anybody. It's hard to not fall into that narrative here, though. To me, fighting in the White House, that doesn't do it. But maybe I'm a different person. Maybe everybody looks at it different. For me, if you tell me they're going to have a fight at the White House, cool, all right. It'd be cool to do it. If not, whatever. A fight's a fight. Maybe John looks at it.
He trains. He smiles. And he speaks in clean, steady lines. His footage tells the rest of the story. Fast feet, wasted motion. Sharp hands ever thrown in panic. Grappling intelligent, measured, and built on balance that rarely breaks. Tom Aspinall doesn't just look like the blueprint for a modern heavyweight. He fights like he already read your game plan. That's why this matchup has teeth, tall, quick, disciplined. Exactly the kind of profile that demands elite problem-solving from Jon Jones. Fear has never been the accusation with Jones. Calculus has. Because in his world, you either pick your moment or your moment picks you to you. The White House angle is either genius or theater. On paper, it sounds wild. In practice, the UFC has a habit of turning wild into real. Rumors are swirling that a 250th anniversary card in 2026 could be built around one of the most audacious ideas in combat sports history. Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall at the White House. Yes, the White House. And while it may sound like clickbait, there are credible voices insisting it's plausible Ivan the right political lift and corporate muscle. It's pure speculation, but it's loud enough to keep phones buzzing and timelines melting. Dana White has already called Jones versus Aspinall the dream headliner for a milestone event. And if your goal is to make a poster the world can't scroll past, you could do worse than the greatest technician of his era versus the smoothest rising heavyweight in years. But then comes the number. $110 million, a figure straight out of boxing mythology, not standard UFC math. Base pay in the UFC lives modestly. The upside is buried in bonuses, PPV points, and pay-per-view projections. But leverage lives in the ask, not just the payout. If Jon Jones plants a mountain no one has ever climbed, he's not just stalling. He's forcing a new conversation about what a singular night is worth. Critics say it's straight out of the Conor McGregor playbook. Shift the fight from the cage to the narrative, ask for the moon, and make the negotiation the event. The counterpunch is simple. You still have to fight. Audacity sells posters. Only until the door shuts and the clock starts. That's why this saga fuels so much backlash. Dana White has admitted the fight was lined up once already. Nods were exchanged. Contracts were sketched. Then, Jones retired. That history makes every new tease feel fragile until ink hits paper. Behind the scenes, you can sense the calculus that a one-off spectacle could redefine the ceiling for the brand. But a stalled division hurts the base of the pyramid. The UFC is built on momentum. And momentum doesn't like cliffhangers. They tease some point. You either bet big or build forward without waiting for a legend to decide what matters next. Other voices have added spice. A respected coach said the constant flip-flop has turned compelling into exhausting. Chael Sonnen joked, if Jones wants $110 million, Aspinall should counter with Buckingham Palace. Brendan Schaub called the number fantasy, noting that flat UFC checks just don't reach that stratosphere. Fans split along familiar lines. Some labeled Jones delusional, saying he's pricing himself out of relevance. Others saluted the leverage king, claiming only a once-in-a-generation draw can reset the market. But the louder the noise gets, the clearer one truth becomes. The matchup is the magnet, not the math, because beyond the headlines and hashtags sits the actual fight. System versus speed. Jon Jones is a system. He measures range like a surveyor. He walks you onto intercepting elbows. He drags you into clinch trips that reshape entire rounds. He builds reads, then punishes habits. Tom Aspinall is the test for that system. He shortens exchanges with clever footwork. He jabs to hide bigger weapons. He scrambles with balance that erases mistakes before they exist. If styles make fights, this is a stylist's dream. And it's a textbook reason to stop arguing online and just lock the cage. There's also the patriotic pitch Jones has leaned into. He's framed the White House idea as a chance to represent America on a milestone night. Wrapped in national pride, the $110 million ask becomes a legacy bid instead of a cash grab. But here's the truth. The opponent still defines the night. That if it's not Aspinall, the outrage will spike again. That if it is Aspinall and Jones wins, the legend grows. If it is Aspinall and Jones loses, the number becomes the punchline. That's the gamble behind grandeur. The stage can crown you. Or it can expose you. Aspinall's patience versus the clock. Meanwhile, Tom Aspinall's patience has become its own narrative. He's the reigning champion, but without the dance partner he deserves. While the previous king drifts in and out of the headlines, Aspinall keeps showing up. No theatrics. No posturing, just training, fighting, winning. His supporters argue that the sport owes him clarity, not riddles. They want names on paper, dates with ink, and a roadmap that moves forward, not in circles. Because the longer this drags on, the more fans start to see him as a champion without a throne, stuck in limbo, while the ghost of a former ruler casts a shadow he can't escape. And that's not something you can fix in the GYM. At some point, timing becomes the third fighter in the cage, and timing always picks a side. When the cage shuts now, imagine the bell finally rings in that historic lawn. The lights pulse, the air thickens, the cage door closes, and the noise dies. Suddenly, the sport becomes simple again. Jones tests range and reactions. He searches for the moment to turn defense into punishment. Aspinall tests exits and posture. He tries to make the greatest problem solver in MMA pick the wrong answer at speed. Round by round, adjustment by adjustment. The myth either hardens or it shatters. The other path, and now imagine the alternative. No deal. No date. The division rolls on. New contenders rise. New posters hit the strip. And the conversation quietly moves past the man who used to own every headline. Because legends are not only remembered for what they accomplished, remembered for how their stories end. Strip away the memes, the money, the madness, and you're left with the same equation the fight game has always used. Two names. One night. A truth you can't spin. The White House would be unforgettable, and $110 million makes for a hell of a headline. But neither throws a punch. The matchup does. If Jon Jones wants to close his book in fireworks, he already knows the name the world will accept. And if the UFC wants to make an event that echoes for decades, it knows exactly which main event to book. Just make the fight, ring the bell, and let the cage decide what the microphones can't.